You're listening to Through Our Lens with the Disabled and Nondisabled Alliance, or DANA. We're a club at Sac State for disabled students, staff, and their allies who discuss and educate each other on disability topics/issues, advocate for the disabled community, and hang out together. So we want to be more recognizable to Sac State. So please join the conversation by following and messaging us on Instagram at Dana at Sac State. It's DANA at Sac State. DANA at Sac State. Hi everyone, this is Brian Tao. This is going to be our second episode of Through Our Lens with the Disabled and Nondisabled Alliance. Our topic today is going to be about dining out with disabilities. It's going to be a little bit different from the last podcast. Last one they had more structure, but this one is going to be a really more freeform format. We're just going to have a conversation on our experiences on dining out and what can be improved on. But who knows, we might get off track. We have nothing planned at all, so we're just going to talk. At first, we were going to do cooking with disabilities, but that was going to be repetitive because our second blog post that just got released today is exactly about that. We wanted our topic to be a little bit similar, but not the same and additive. So we're doing the opposite of cooking. We're going out to eat. But don't forget to read our blog post on kssc.com. Okay, so I am here today with William and Rian, and we are the officers of Dana. Welcome, everyone.
Hello. Yeah, this is definitely not going to be a scripted one. We definitely didn't have an entire ostensible recording session yesterday for practice.
Yeah. Anyways, to kind of get us started, I wanted to ask this question: what is the process of making sure the restaurants are accessible, or letting the staff know about your disability? I need a bigger table because I'm in a wheelchair, something like that.
Yeah, I use a very large power wheelchair, and it absolutely requires a ramp. I can't do steps at all. So we always look up the restaurant to check for external access, on Google Maps or on their own website. And if we can't figure it out just by looking at their pictures, or if they don't have any pictures, then we try to call ahead to make sure, especially if it's a fine dining venue, or if it's something we're doing for a family activity. Because even if they don't have a ramp currently, if we give them enough time, then they should be able to come up with something to help us get in, go over to the hardware store and get a nice big plank of wood that I can roll up or something. Or maybe they can ask around their connections and see if anybody has a portable ramp. Or worst case scenario, they can't come up with anything and we have to bring our portable ramp, which is a pain and doesn't fit in our car very well. But last case scenario, unfortunately, we can't always bring our portable ramp with us because we aren't always going to know that the place we stop at for dinner is accessible. Sometimes we don't have time to call ahead. Sometimes we're on the go and we just have to deal with what we end up with, and that gets chaotic.
Yeah, it does. So I use a really big wheelchair too, and I'm doing the exact same. So I'm looking at the pictures. I mean, at first I always look at the pictures for the food. First, is it delicious or not? And then I look at the pictures from the outside, on Yelp or Google. Yeah. And then if it looks like it's not wheelchair accessible, I'll probably just call ahead. I have this story that I have in mind right now. There was a time when I went to New York City. Essentially, it was 6 years ago, and essentially, I looked at the place, and I wasn't sure if it was accessible or not, because New York City buildings are sometimes inaccessible. Who knows? So I decided to call ahead and ask, is the place wheelchair accessible or accessible? And they basically said yes, but to kind of get into the entrance, there's a step, so I can't even get into the restaurant. The
That's still so bad.
yeah, that's so yeah.
I'm gonna repeat this, but like, yeah, it's totally accessible on the inside. You can't get in. Don't worry about it. Please give us your money.
That's the thing about calling ahead is you need to be really specific when you're asking about accessibility, because your idea of accessibility is not guaranteed to be the same as their idea of accessibility. Yeah, you really got to be specific. Like, are there steps to the entrance? Yes. Is there a ramp I could take to get into the building? Yes or no? Are there steps within the restaurant? How much space is there between the tables? Sometimes they're so cramped together that you can't even get by, and then you're gonna have to go through that embarrassing parade of waiters and waitresses asking people to move out of their seats so they can move the chairs and tables so you can get by. It's just, sometimes you really gotta call ahead, and you gotta be super specific, and it'll feel like you're interrogating them and they might get defensive, but hey, you got to do what you got to do.
Yeah, and this restaurant was the steakhouse. It was a fine dining restaurant. And I would be paying a lot of money there.
Oh, God.
Yeah. It's not
You don't have to go to steakhouse. Of all, like, I as a thoroughly straight white man, I am obviously a huge fan of steak, but it is an ecological nightmare. And like, the emergent theme that like appears throughout this topic as we talk about it, and we're going to continue to do so, is mostly that, and it's going to keep coming back, that for disabled people, trying to eat out involves a lot more trouble than it does for non-disabled people. Is going to be the theme, and we'll keep like expanding on like why that is and how that comes to be, but that's going to be the basic the thing that we're going to keep coming back to is it's just a lot harder for disabled people to do this thing, and it involves,
specifically because things have been constructed that in a way that's hostile to disabled people. These restaurants and the laws and regulations around them, and the culture that's formed around them, that's all with a able-bodied neurotypical state of mind. And when that happens, it's only natural that entire swaths of people will get excluded in the process simply because they were either not thinking about it or were trying to actively exclude us from the start.
Yeah. And if there's like an explanation for why that occurs, and even like, I guess, more theoretical, and that's not necessarily to say more meritorious, but more theoretical than the explanation that like people aren't thinking about it, because that's true, is that there is a certain relationship which the economic facts have to the cultural facts in most like social settings, where you get the restaurant arranged in such a way that is beneficial to its bottom line. You cram as many tables in there as you can because you need the most people in there that you possibly can get, and the natural like rationalization for that is not directly always capitalist. When it comes up that you are by that design excluding a certain demographic of people, the rationale can't be to the effect that we should change this design because obviously this design is profitable for us. So the rationale, or you're working for a chain restaurant and you can't do anything anyway. So the rationale has to become, well, we're just not going to get any disabled customers, and that has to be like,
it's a self-fulfilling prophecy, because if you make a structure that's hostile to disabled people, of course you're not going to get any disabled customers.
Yeah. So Rian, do you want to go into your story?
Yeah,
their
I
road
was
trip?
about to say this ties in really nicely because what you just explained still doesn't explain what happened to me when we were on a road trip before the pandemic. We had to stop for the night at this those like little rest stop places in the middle of nowhere that have like
Mm-hmm.
2 or 3 buildings and that's it.
Yeah.
Like nobody lives there. There's just 3 buildings. It was one of those places. One building was the motel, another was a convenience store, and another was a cute little restaurant that
Mm-hmm.
had burgers, fries, whatnot. And very obviously a family-owned, family-run thing. It definitely wasn't a chain or anything. Um, and it was just kind of down the hill from the motel. So we got settled in a motel, went down to the restaurant because it was literally the only place to eat for miles and miles. If we wanted to eat somewhere else, we'd have to drive at least another half hour or more. We were tired. We'd been driving the whole day, not up for it. Um, and we get there. First red flag, there's no handicap parking.
What?
There's no handicap parking. And we look at the entrance, and it's one of those entrances where there's 2 stairs leading up to the door from the sides, and then there's a little platform and then the door, right? And we're like, there is not a ramp. Let's go inside and ask if they have another entrance. So my parents went in and asked, and they came out and explained that they did not have an accessible entrance and that they used to have a ramp, but they either sold it or gave it away. I don't know. They got rid of it. They straight up admitted that they used to have a ramp, but they got rid of it because they weren't getting any disabled customers. You're in the middle of nowhere. You're barely getting any customers. Just keep the damn ramp. But sorry, we weren't supposed to swear. But my point being that there is no advantage to getting rid of a ramp that you already have. It's not driving away customers. It's not costing extra expenses. It's just allowing access, and they got rid of it. Like I don't know the full story, obviously, but the dots are not connecting. And William, the explanation you provided earlier makes perfect sense, but I don't think it applies to this one weird restaurant that didn't have a ramp because they got rid of it.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting to get those cases. What I mean to convey is like generally that there's a relationship that culture has to economic effects on the sort of macro scale. So it becomes the case that when disabled people are chronically disenfranchised, that they're not thought to be worthy of the franchise, and that can be true at like the local level. Even I obviously I don't know the full story either, but like one plausible explanation is that there was the attitude that to say there was this like unspoken understanding between the people who had the ramp and the people who made them get rid of it, that like they're we're not going to get disabled customers, and it won't matter if we do because they're not worth serving on some level. Like that doesn't have to be explicitly stated, but it can be understood. Like in much the same way as we could point to various sort of case studies from like the civil rights era for similar sort of cultural insidious zeitgeist. And basically the theme is going to be, I guess the general relation to take away is that the model of base and superstructure, it was first developed by Karl Marx, but it's been expanded upon later on in sociology. It does have like predictive power in a way that I wish it didn't, but it just tends to be true that culture follows from economic facts. So yeah, but that I don't know. For now, let's keep going.
Yeah, and
Yeah, let's keep going.
luckily they did still take our orders and bring out the food, but it was kind of humiliating to not be able to get in the restaurant and drag the manager out, in front of all the customers and be like, "Where's the ramp?" And then have to like go eat back in the motel room when we could have had a nice sit down dinner. But it's just a little mind blowing, just a little. I mean, the restaurant itself was pretty cramped and narrow overall, so even if they did have a ramp, there's a good chance I might not have been able to get in anyway. But if you have a ramp, then it's economically sensible to keep it anyway. I mean, it's not taking up space. It's a ramp.
Or maybe it is taking up space, but like the restaurant in that case has basically nothing but space. It's in the middle of nowhere. Also, I demand that in our headcanon, that restaurant be called the Nowhere Burger.
The Nowhere Burger. Yeah.
Anyway.
So I kind of want to take it back to the original question.
Oh, yeah.
So take it back to the question.
Yeah, it's good. Yeah, I mean, it's good that we're going. Yeah, it's good that we're going on tangents and stuff, because that's good. That's how conversations go, right?
Yeah.
I'm told. I don't know.
Yeah. So I guess like for me, like I always let the staff know, like if I'm just there, if I didn't check beforehand, like I'm in a wheelchair and I need like a bigger table space. Rian, do you know like the process of that? Can you explain that?
I typically kind of try to keep it casual, when we walk up to check in, if it's one of those fancier places, we just say, "Hey, we have a wheelchair. We need enough space for our seating for them to sit at the table." And 9 times out of 10, their immediate response is to just immediately recommend, showing us different tables, which I actually do appreciate, because that is actually the best approach, because it's very obvious that they don't know how to accommodate me precisely, but also I wouldn't expect them to know anyway, because every wheelchair's dimensions are a bit different, and a table that's perfect for one wheelchair user will be unusable by another wheelchair user. So I'm actually really glad that is the most common approach, is to show us our different options and let us choose where to sit. And the times that doesn't happen, that's usually because somebody else made the reservation and didn't check with us about it. And then it ends up that I am having difficulty sitting there. And usually when that happens, I just try to suck it up and deal with it, try to position myself in a way where I can eat most successfully, or I'll just have the plate on my lap because, other tables aren't available.
Yeah.
But yeah, 9 times out of 10, they show us our different options and they let us choose. And then it's actually a really good approach. So good on them for that.
Yeah, I do think it's a really good approach, because I don't know, like if they choose for us, sometimes there's like a pole in the middle of the table and we can't like fit under the table because they're footrest and stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. I guess something else that we should mention is like in fast food places. In a lot of fast food places, there's like designated wheelchair accessible seating, like in In-N-Out and Subway and Wendy's, and that's good.
Yeah, they usually have tables with those little wheelchair symbols on it, with the part of the table that kind of sticks out a bit from the rest of the seating. So there's like space for me to go under the table and actually use it. And they're usually at a good height and not too thick, because the thick tables are more difficult. Because even if the surface height is fine, it might run into my knees, which is painful.
Yeah, it's pretty painful. Yeah, I hate when that happens. So I recently got like a new chair like last year, and I haven't like went to a restaurant yet. Like that, yeah, because this chair is a little like higher than my old one, so like I'm kind of worried about that. Like for some restaurants, anyways.
Yeah, it's always an awkward struggle when you have to deal with what's essentially a new body. You're like in a completely different position than before.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to get used to driving it around and navigating with it too, and like readjust your spatial awareness.
Yeah, because this year is a
Basically,
lot bigger.
techno puberty.
Yeah, it is.
But like, you got to do it again.
Yeah.
There are fan fictions about this.
Anyway, about food. Food.
I swear we're a serious club. Can I just touch on it? Like the interesting, like, again, I use the term emergent theme. I guess it's pretentious, but it's what comes to mind. Is from the idea that, like, it's good to just show people options. Is that as much as we've talked about universal design in Dana, and we'll probably continue to do so, the one of the interesting, like, aspects of taking, like, the philosophical approach to universal design is that, like, options and autonomy can be well integrated into socially constructed systems. And I would even say that, like, in cases where a lot of variables are hard to control for, such as like the height of a particular wheelchair, then you kind of have to make room for autonomy and options in order to have anything approaching universal design. Like, you would have, multiple systems in place, i.e. multiple tables, or maybe multiple builds of table, multiple arrangements or something. And then you have people, and then just like, if people come around who maybe are precluded from one of those arrangements, they can be shown to others. It's I want to make that like a broader concept, right? That you can integrate decision making, you can integrate options into universally designed systems if you're creative about it, I guess. Although it kind of seems to require less creativity.
That
gives
me a thought. Actually,
yeah.
New thought incoming.
No.
In one of our previous meetings, we talked about disability etiquette, and my very basic guidelines for it were 2 rules: ask and listen to the answer, and put yourself in their shoes. And I just realized that accessibility, the rules for making your buildings accessible and accommodating people, that follows those same guidelines. Give them options and make things so that they don't have to ask every time. It's aka universal design. That's an interesting parallel.
Wow, that's interesting.
Totally off topic, but that's an interesting parallel.
I mean, it's not off topic. Yeah, servers have to ask, like, wheelchair users, like, which table is good. So that does really follow along with it.
Yeah. And universal design being, already having a ramp out in the open, obvious, no steps inside, more space between the tables. That's all stuff that could be regulated and incorporated into the building itself. And then when it comes to individual needs beyond those basic universal design type level things, then you ask, which table works best for you.
Yeah. And like, can I just say that, like, you can regulate those things in, and I think that's why that we usually see disabled accessible tables in like chain restaurants and fast food places that are administered by large corporations, because those large corporations are subject to the same laws as everyone else theoretically, except for the taxes, of course. But like, they are subject to things like the ADA. Across sometimes several hundred restaurants, they wind up having to conform to that regulation because the risks of being sued for non-compliance just expands dramatically over the course of having multiple restaurants. So they at the corporate level can like regulate in the tables and such, whereas like a family-owned place doesn't necessarily have to, because their risk is pretty minimal. Just being one restaurant, if they're non-compliant with ADA, and possibly, I believe that steakhouse in New York that Brian mentioned was there's a reasonable chance because it was in New York that it was just old architecture and that it hadn't been renewed since ADA came into place. But as far as explaining the difference between chain restaurants sometimes being significantly more accessible than places that are usually, for the most part, more like ethical as far as businesses go, that might be the explanation, that capitalism operates on threat, that the risk of lawsuit becomes greater the more restaurants you have. So if you just have the one, the risk is minimal, even if you are, again, non-compliant. And then there's obviously the cost of things like integration.
Mm-hmm.
Can I just say that and I'll reference this again, can we make the new where's the beef, where's the ramp? Can we do that? Can we just decide that's a thing culturally now?
Yeah, let's do it. Let's make a poster on Instagram.
Yeah.
Share it around.
Make a poster for my wall.
That'd be so funny. Having
I don't even know where's the beef
around
come from. I just know it's common as a reference.
Wait, is that Wendy's or a fast food place? Or is no? I don't know.
Where's the beef? I don't know.
Yeah.
Is it it might be 80s level? It might be an 80s reference humor thing.
Yeah.
Shout out to Inside Job for that one nostalgia episode where I heard "Where's the beef" for the first time in decades.
Yeah. I think I'm thinking of the Arby's one. We have the meats.
Oh yeah, we have.
Yeah.
Does Arby's have the ramp?
The ramps.
I mean, I hope so.
One would hope. I mean, genuinely, maybe. Again, fast food. Again, the corporate structure makes that more likely, which is sort of ironic.
Yeah,
we all have too many thoughts.
Yeah. So I guess when William was talking about New York City and the buildings are kind of old. I know in Sacramento, I have complete confidence that most of the buildings will be accessible. So I don't have to always call in and make sure it is. But New York City, it's pretty old. Sacramento is pretty new. So that's something to take into account.
Yeah. Helpfully, also Sacramento is pretty flat.
Oh yeah, it's pretty flat.
Yeah, I mean, elevating the entire city was in response to the floods. That makes things pretty flat.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it does make things flat.
I still can't get over that fact. These people rebuilt an entire city. All right, but speaking of more accessible alternatives, when you're going out to eat, one thing I find super helpful is programs like DoorDash and Uber Eats. Mm-hmm. Well, not programs, companies. They bleed you dry every time you take an order, but it's really handy. I can't drive, and I live in an area where it's mostly houses, and the nearest place to eat is at least a 30-minute walk away. And so if I want dinner and I want something to eat, I could either walk 2 hours to the city center and back, or I could call Uber Eats and have my pick of restaurants and they could bring it to me within the hour. Not quickly, mind you, it's usually a 40-minute wait, but it's better than going out and driving for 2 hours for a meal.
Mm-hmm.
And it is expensive, but it's very handy and it's very useful. Especially because you can tell them to hand it to you at the door instead of leaving it there so that you can actually take it in, because if they left it at the door I wouldn't be able to pick it up. But
yeah,
it's a very flexible and door opening method to eating out. My only wish is that they treat their workers better, and that maybe figure out a way to adjust the prices so that it's not prohibitively expensive. Because if you're using DoorDash and Uber Eats to eat out for all your meals, then that's a disabled thing. A lot of disabled people rely on it. And at the same time, we are consistently underpaid, not hired, unemployed struggle to get on SSI because SSI is incredibly difficult to get on in the first place. And it's even worse now that people with long COVID are trying to get on, and there's this huge influx of people trying to get on, and the department's like, oh no, a lot of people are trying to get on. It must be fraud. No, there's a pandemic. And so now it's even more difficult than before to get on SSI. And even then, it's only like $700 max. That's like barely half your rent these days. So my point being, it is expensive, which is a huge issue. But the nature of the operation itself, it does make things a lot more accessible to disabled people.
Yeah, it does make a lot of things accessible. For me, I use DoorDash like way too much. I know for January, I did 9 orders of DoorDash in January.
Nice.
And it's just, yeah, I still live with my parents, and like I don't want to eat the same stuff, eat Asian food every single day. Like I want to try different stuff, so I always like get DoorDash just to try different things.
Mediterranean and Afghani food are really good.
Mm-hmm,
we have a couple of restaurants like that in my area, and they're so good.
Yeah, they are so good. I like the white sauce a lot.
I'm getting hungry now. I want a kebab.
Me too.
So I can stab the patriarchy. I brought this in last time we thought we were recording because I think it's worth bringing in as like a somewhat broader and more practical like economic point. Like I think a critic of Dana and of like of our like advocacy efforts insofar as they exist would say something like, obviously dining out and the problems that occur therein is kind of a first world problem, isn't it? Like we only have access to these problems because we're relatively wealthy and we happen to live here and all that stuff. And I'll say that like for myself, disability doesn't super strongly intersect with my like restaurant ability. If I go through like a drive-through menu, and I have done, and I'm always in the passenger seat for the same reason, I can't see well. So the drive-through menu is not really available there for me on a practical level. Inside the restaurant, sometimes if there's low lighting, the same, or if you're in a fast food place, the menu's typically over the counter and pretty far away. I mean, I don't think almost anyone else has a problem, but like I do. And we haven't even touched on like the presence of of loud noise in there and everything else. And we'll probably get to that. But I want to say first of all that like, yeah, it's kind of a first world problem, maybe, but not all problems which occur in so-called the first world are first world problems. First of all, because there's a large part of the United States, a large cumulative section, which is a food desert, which if you are disabled, you're disproportionately likely to live in, because you're as we say, like disabled people are characteristically I'm going to put it in these terms, they're characteristically like less efficient as employees and less profitable as customers. You have to theoretically, you can't extract quite as much labor from a disabled person usually as you can a non-disabled person. You can't extract quite enough return on investment from a disabled person, all else being equal, as you can from like a non-disabled person. So if you happen to be one of those folks, like this is not a first world problem for you. Like the restaurants being accessible is kind of a necessity for life, because you can't access like grocers with produce and cereal grains and stuff. And even to the extent that it is like a first world problem, it's still, a problem, and not for the usual like rhetorical reasons where nobody can invalidate your pain and all that stuff. Maybe that's like the case, but also it just seems fundamentally unfair that like there's a certain margin of difficulty which non-disabled people encounter when they want to go out to eat, and it's a perfectly normal thing for anybody theoretically to do. And disabled people, by conceit, encounter, at least often, a significantly greater portion of difficulty. It's way beyond the fair share and beyond the norm, and that seems inherently like a societal injustice. So that's kind of, I want to bring that in to just mention it. That's kind of the frame through which we're approaching this, even to the extent that it is like a wealthy person's problem. It's not exclusively a wealthy person's problem, and it would still be a problem, you know?
Yeah. And to tie that in with the topic that you brought up with the sounds and smells, there
Yes.
are a lot of obstacles to a healthy relationship with food when you're disabled, no matter what your disability is, because so many disabilities impact your ability to eat food on a regular basis. Maybe it's because your disability makes it really difficult for you to work or find or hold down a job, or maybe it's because your disability means you can't move out of the food desert. Maybe it's because your disability means you can't eat a lot of foods. Maybe you have a lot of medical food restrictions or food allergies, or maybe it's because you're neurodivergent and you just cannot eat certain foods, not because you're allergic or medically restricted from those foods, but because the taste, texture, sight, maybe even of those foods, or smell, um, a sensory aspect of that food is enough to make you throw up in your mouth. And you don't want to be throwing up while you're eating, right? It makes it really hard to eat. And or maybe even you have an eating disorder and eating is already difficult for you in the first place. So if there's nothing available around you, then well, might as well just not eat. Or maybe your disability impacts your ability to make food. So maybe if you don't have any restaurants but you do have a grocery store, you still can't eat because you can't make food with the ingredients from the grocery store because you can't cook. Um, and so there are a lot of obstacles, and that's kind of why eating out is still um an important front to make progress on, because sometimes eating out is one of your only options, and if it's not accessible, then what do you do?
Yeah.
And to tie that in with the sensory things that William started to bring up earlier, there are a lot of obstacles that some neurodivergent people can encounter when eating out. Maybe there's just an overwhelming amount of noise, or there are particular sounds that are very aggravating to their hearing. Maybe the smells are really overpowering. Maybe the lighting is causing them migraines. As I mentioned earlier, there could be an issue with the taste and texture of food, and especially so when there's surprise ingredients. I've seen this pattern in a lot of fine dining restaurants where they will have the food item, and they will list the ingredients, but they don't list all of the ingredients, and you kind of end up with a little surprise food group or ingredient in your meal. And then if you are a person with food restrictions of one nature or another, that can be a huge issue because you aren't going to know whether or not it's likely to have that food in it, or maybe it usually doesn't have that food in it, so you think it's fine, and then you order it and it has that one food that you can't eat, and it ruins the whole meal. um like, for example, mushrooms. My sister is not neurodivergent, but she is a picky eater, and I think picky eaters should be respected because she cannot stand the taste or texture of mushrooms. And so if it's mixed in with something, it's basically contaminated the entirety of what it's mixed in with, because she can still taste it even when she picks it out, which I think is an incredible ability, and I feel bad for her because mushrooms are delicious, but still, it makes her gag, and I don't want my sister to be suffering when she is trying to eat a meal, right? Um, and so that kind of leads into some solutions, because they might seem like inherent problems that, oh, it's not the restaurant's problem, it's the disabled person's problem, we don't have to deal with it. But that's not true. There are things you can do to fix these problems. When it comes to the sounds and smells and lighting, you can try to set up a quiet space for customers to go to when things are too overstimulating, or maybe have an easy quick way out of the restaurant so they can go back to their car and kind of try to calm down there. Um, as for the texture and taste of food and the surprise ingredients, a great help with that would be two solutions: to have a menu that's available to all customers that has typical comfort foods, stuff that stays the same every time you eat them. Big reason that texture and taste can be an issue is, say you offer an autistic child a choice between two snacks, a cracker or a grape. They're going to go for the cracker because the cracker stays the same every time and the grape does not. It could be mushy one time, super firm the next, and they're going to want to go with something that's more predictable that they know they'll like. So if you have a menu that's based off of that they could choose from, say like fried chicken, plain pasta, maybe mac and cheese, a simple grilled cheese sandwich, then they'll be able to fall back on something that they can actually eat without worrying about if this new food they're trying is going to make them throw up. And the other solution is to have all of the ingredients listed on the menu. Either that or make it really easy to access all of the ingredients. That way there's no surprises, they're fully prepared, and anyone with food allergies can say, hey, please don't put this in my food. And then it's down to the restaurant to comply with that. But those are some really, honestly, pretty easy to implement solutions that restaurants could do to make things a lot easier on disabled people whose disabilities impact more than just the physical environment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm really glad that like gluten-free options has become like readily available in a lot of restaurants, and it's just easy. You just tell them gluten-free, and they'll just do it, no problems.
I want to say also that like I think it would be broadly helpful if people who work in food generally, but like restaurants and also had more power in their workplace. If they had like unions and shit, they would have we can do one. If they had unions and whatnot, if they had like a counter threat to levy against capital, they could do things like abolish the tip. Like this has been well trod ground, but like you just got to pay wait staff a fair wage. There's no room anymore for tips. No one wants them. No one likes them. And even the people who do like them are duped. If there could be, generally speaking, restaurateurs and capital generally will try to hire the fewest possible people and extract the most work from them possible. So a counter threat means that there could be more cooks in the kitchen, which would give them more time, the luxury of more time to do things like remove specific ingredients from the recipe in the process of cooking a thing, rather than like, as you might have to, psychologically speaking, just do the rote usual thing that you do when cooking that specific meal as a cook. As well, it would be really helpful if like the employees of organizations like Uber Eats and DoorDash were actually officially employees, and if they had a counter threat against capital, such that they could do things like have a wage and arrange things ultimately so that the company doesn't absorb as much of the revenue from each transaction as they currently do, which is why it's so expensive. Yet the drivers obviously do get paid next to nothing.
And honestly, even when you tip them, the tip function in the app, not all of the tip goes to them, and then what's the point of tipping if it's not going to go to the driver that you want to tip? Yeah. And then it makes it dangerous because then, how do you tip them discreetly without their employer finding out and then punishing them for it, right? But yeah, in this session, we are pro-union, anti-capitalist, anti-profit.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I kind of want to bring us back to the ADA. I know you have like solutions prepared of like how to fix the ADA, how to make it more easily enforceable.
Did I? Wait a second.
I think we
You
did.
were all about suing yesterday. You were
Oh,
all about
right.
suing.
Yes. God, thank you. Yeah. Okay. Here's the idea basically. ADA and a lot of regulations like it have no force without, again, a threat against capital. Like you need to be able to threaten their incomes in order to get policy, to get like things at restaurants to change. That's why I explained it. I said earlier that chain restaurants tend to have more accessibility in ADA compliance because the risk of getting sued by somebody with the power to do so increases dramatically. But on a smaller scale, or if the corporation just like thinks it can get away with it, if some analyst somewhere says so, they're still not going to be ADA compliant in general. And so the one way to like give law like ADA, where it would have to be disputed, or would have to be taken to civil courts to actually have an impact, and you'd have to win and everything. And typically the corporation will settle out of court anyway, but if they change policy anyway, that's fine. Like a way to make those laws more forceful, more toothsome, is to make it easier for people to bring legitimate lawsuits against corporations as individual people. Like we can't, rearrange society overnight to be through the legislative process to be more inclined towards collective action, but you can, through legislation, make it easier for people to get a lawyer and levy a legitimate claim against a corporation, which could cost them money, which could get policy changed. And in addition, we mentioned yesterday, and it wasn't my idea, but a sort of companion piece to that legislation that just makes it easier to sue based on ADA would be a grant and or like loan system to private firms, which could allow places which need it, and it should be needs based, so nothing going to McDonald's, but like something going to that one steakhouse in New York or whatever. Like it could be needs based, such that they could have the capital on hand to build things like ramps, which they may or may not, like initially. And I know it's not lost on us, and I want to mention it. It's not lost on us that most capitalists are themselves under sincere threat in the same way that everyone else is. Like we're all threatened with homelessness and poverty all the time. So they might not have if they don't have the money on hand, they're going to have to find some way out. But if they can get that money anyway, if they can do that construction and they're made to, then they will, and we'll get more accessible businesses out of the deal in general, but also specifically restaurants.
And to clarify, by private firms, you meant the restaurants, right? Grants and loans to the restaurants.
Yeah.
And the whole reason it has to be suing, by the way, is because there is no agency or group of people that is specifically tasked with enforcing the ADA. It doesn't fall on the police. It doesn't fall on the mayors or any sort of figure of authority. It falls on individual disabled people to say, hey, your place is inaccessible. What are you going to do about it? And, it often does come down to the threat of suing to get people to change, which is really frustrating because a lot of disabled people don't have the resources to sue. It costs money to sue. It costs money to pay lawyers. It costs a lot of time and energy to go through that process. And it's really stressful too, because you're basically arguing for your right to access a public space, which has already been established, but you still have to fight anyway. And then the other thing too is that bigger companies can just settle and then not change anything. So then, you've got money, but nothing else to show for it. The whole point is that you're trying to get into the building, not bleed money out of people. And that is a huge argument I've seen from a lot of ableist people, is that, disabled people are suing all of these poor family-owned restaurants for absolutely no reason. And that's not true. There is no person that would sue without reason, and I can guarantee it's not to get money.
Sorry, there are a handful of people who would definitely sue without reason. One of them
Okay,
used to be
true,
president.
but like overall, the goal is to create change, not to bleed the poor mom and pop store dry. And that's something I really want to emphasize, because that is a very common misconception, that disabled people are leeches that try to bleed money dry from a whole bunch of different places, like mom and pop stores or the government, and that's entirely missing the point. The point is going 3 miles over your head. You're not getting it. But yeah.
Yeah. So I guess before we end it in like 5 to 7 minutes, I want to kind of ask like the social reason, like why would I like go out? What's the point of going out?
Oh, right. People do social stuff, don't they? Huh, okay, I'll say I'll do something, but like I generally speaking, like the only reason I would go out would be to socialize with people. I don't tend to find it to be inherently fun or necessary, and that's just a personal thing. But yeah, it would be a social exercise, an exercise of interpersonal relationships where nobody wants to cook. We just want to have a sit down meal, and again, of course, it's not ideal to live in a society where like every social thing is tied to some kind of transaction, but insofar as it is that way, it still it's obviously unfair if a certain group of people finds it disproportionately difficult to engage in those social interactions anyway. But yeah, it's like a social thing.
Yeah, I think for me, like because it's COVID, you're still in the pandemic kind of. I like going out just to kind of like see something else than my room, than the house. And it's nice to just kind of relax and socialize with family, with friends.
Yeah, I haven't really been out in restaurants since COVID started, except a handful of times when it was somebody's birthday and I couldn't weasel out of it. But yeah, I mean that's really often the only times we eat out is when there's some sort of celebration, or it's a family gathering of some sort. And a few times it was just to hang out with friends and catch up, because we haven't seen each other in a while. Yeah, it's kind of a bringing together type activity, not just socializing and hanging out, but also just spending time with the people you love. And there's no better way to do it than to ungracefully slurp up a plate of pasta, right?
Is there any other way?
I know, right?
Than ungracefully.
Yeah, it's just nice to kind of relax and chill with your family. So I guess we're gonna end it really soon. Does Rihanna or William have any last words before I make our announcements?
Where's the ramp? Popularize it, normalize it. Twitter hashtags or something. I don't know.
Yeah, I guess we should start like a hashtag on Instagram or Twitter. That'd be really fun.
Instagram does hashtags? Cool.
Yeah.
I guess my last words would be that everyone has inherent value, and I think we should definitely move away as quickly as possible from this mindset of tying value to your ability to be profitable and make money. And we should probably restructure the way we see society as a way of connecting with each other rather than a way to make money. And overall, I think that will be beneficial both physically healthy wise and also mentally healthy wise for everybody.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. So I guess to kind of summarize what we kind of talked about today, we talk about dining out with disabilities. We talk about the good experiences, the bad experiences, solutions to make it more accessible, and yeah. And so we're gonna end it right now, but I want to make some announcements. So we have a blog series that comes out every Monday at 8 a.m. Don't forget to check out today's blog which is about cooking with disabilities, and it kind of falls hand in hand with this topic. And don't forget our podcast. Our podcast is every Monday at 12 p.m. Just go to keyinstitute.com and click Listen Live. And lastly, check out our YouTube channel as well. If you want to learn more about different disability topics other than this topic, feel free to watch the recordings. And you can find the link in our Instagram page at Sac State. Just click the link tree in our bio. Thank you so much for listening to us, and bye. Thank you.
Bye.
We're good at podcasting? Okay.
That should be our ending tagline. We're good at podcasting.
Thank you so much for listening. Bye, everyone. You're listening to Through Our Lens with the Disabled and Nondisabled Alliance, or DANA. We're a club at Sac State for disabled students, staff, and their allies who discuss and educate each other on disability topics/issues, advocate for the disabled community, and hang out together. So we want to be more recognizable to Sac State. So please join the conversation by following and messaging us on Instagram at Dana at Sac State. It's DANA at Sac State. DANA at Sac State.